charismatic leader swept to power by the people's will. To the world, Thailand is the latest country to experience a democratic awakening. But there is a darker story. A story of killing and cover-up.
Where were the bullets coming from? From up there.
Last year, scores of civilians were killed in bloody clashes in Bangkok, many shot by the army. But the military hasn't faced justice for its role. As they battle for the truth, the families of the victims say they're obstructed at every turn.
I am furious, defeated and angry altogether. Why? I feel sorry because I know who ordered the killing.
Tonight, some of the government's own investigators tell us they're being told to cover up army killings. Now, after her landslide election victory, the new leader promises to expose the truth. If she delivers, it'll be an historic first for Thailand. We journey into the murky world of power in Thailand and ask if those who've always killed with impunity will at last face justice. It is a haven of peace in the centre of Bangkok. A Buddhist temple. But it's also a place of sorrow. For this mother, Phayao Achahad has come to make an offering for the soul of a daughter killed here a year ago.
I don't want to come here. Because when I'm here, I really miss my daughter. This is the only place in Bangkok I don't want to be.
Nurse Kamon Ked was killed tending to the wounded in a medical tent when Thailand's army fired into this temple last May. 25-year-old Ked had always wanted to help the victims of disaster and joined the Red Cross as a volunteer nurse.
She had a volunteer spirit. I often stopped her going. The reason that I stopped trying to discourage her was after she came back from helping people at the tsunami. At that time, she went without telling me. And then when she came back, I told her off, and my daughter said to me, "Don't worry about me. I am part of this country."
For the last 12 months, Phayao Achahad has battled to uncover the truth about what happened in this sacred place. But a year on, she's no nearer getting justice. On the other side of the world, another woman is caught up in the same struggle. On the day Nurse Ked was killed, a 45-year-old Italian photographer was recording the unfolding drama on Bangkok streets.
He was a young man that loves very much music, very friendly, very sportive, loves very much women, and a simple person.
Fabio Polenghi followed his sister Isa into photography. From Milan, his early work was in fashion. But he became bored and began working on social issues in the developing world. Last year, he was following a story of political upheaval, the anti-government red shirt protests in Bangkok. He'd been there for 3 months when his sister, asleep in her Milan apartment, was awoken by a telephone call.
Around 8, my phone started to ring. And a friend of mine, a very old friend of mine, just started shouting in my ear, "Fabio's been killed."
Isa flew immediately to Bangkok. She found Fabio in a hospital mortuary.
I could see Fabio laying down on this little bed. His face was far away from what I remember of him. You try to recognize him, but there is something that probably is that you realize the person is gone.
Issa knew Fabio had been shot dead on the final day of the Red Shirt protests, May 19, 2010. His friends showed her his blood at the scene of the killing. She watched as the council trucks washed it away. Back in Milan, Issa was haunted by questions. She was troubled by information given to the Italian ambassador by Thai authorities.
He told me that Fabio was working up and down through the front line and that snipers were shooting and probably a red shirt shoot him, a sniper.
For Issa, that judgment was too swift.
I said, well, if it's so clear, why we have evidence then? But there were no evidence, so it was a too fast conclusion.
As two women, one Thai, the other Italian, set out to try and discover the truth, they would confront a culture in which the powerful have never been held to account. But to understand how their loved ones came to die on the streets of Bangkok, we must travel to the roots of a political crisis that divided Thailand.
An ancient Thai inscription reads, "This land is good, in the water there is fish, in the fields there is rice. Whoever wants to trade, trades. The faces of the people shine bright with happiness." Thailand refers to itself as the land of smiles. The trouble with Thailand is the enormous gap between the very wealthy few and the peasant majority.
Here in the rural heartland, a charismatic politician started a social revolution.
During Thaksin Shinawatra's government, villagers could complain about their troubles. The government responded to these troubles very well. In his government, uneducated and lower class people could meet the Prime Minister. There were government authorities that helped people.
Thaksin Shinawatra was an ex-police colonel who became a billionaire. His vast business empire even included Manchester City Football Club. He won 2 elections, in the process becoming Thailand's longest-serving Prime Minister. Despite widespread allegations of corruption and of major human rights abuse, he remained hugely popular with the poor.
Every household had a better life, a better living. They had money that belonged to them and which they could spend. The economy in the village improved.
It was out here in the countryside that Thaksin Shinawatra cultivated his power base, among people who felt they'd never before had a stake in society. He forged this coalition of outsiders along with people in the sprawling cities to create the most powerful mass political movement this country had ever seen. But it was a movement that would eventually face a bloody showdown on the streets of Bangkok. For Thaksin's power was a direct challenge to the elite who'd always dominated Thai life. The Democracy Monument in central Bangkok is a grandiose tribute to something Thais have only rarely experienced.
As the guns fire a salute to their majesties, the king uses the occasion to glorify the role of the soldier as defender of the nation's integrity.
In Thailand, real power has always lain with the monarchy and the army. They control a vast network of patronage. The 83-year-old king is widely revered. The army draws its legitimacy from acting as his defender.
The military and the monarchy dominated politics.
Who controls who? Is it the military controlling the monarchy, or is it the monarchy controlling the military?
When two sides believe that they use one another, we have an English word we call collaborations. Right? They collaborate. They use each other.
To protect its power, the army has ruthlessly crushed any threats. In the last 70 years, there have been 18 military coups and bloody crackdowns on political enemies.
The assault began just after daybreak. Then came moments of pure horror as the 2,000 leftist students, including many girls, began surrendering. The police did nothing to prevent several being beaten to death after arrest.
Not once have soldiers faced justice for their actions.
The Thai military seem indifferent to the reaction inside this country or outside of such repression.
The king has sometimes opposed such coups, but his interventions haven't altered the fundamental dynamic of Thai politics.
The history of Thailand is dotted with coups, short-lived military governments, sometimes long-lived military governments, because the military sees itself, and the monarchy sees the military, as the protector of the monarchy, not the protector of democracy.
But Thaksin's natural instincts would bring conflict with this elite.
I'm aggressive. I'm work fast. I want to drive to the success.
Like an ambitious tycoon, Thaksin set out to extend his influence into the two most powerful institutions in Thailand.
Thaksin wanted his own loyalists in charge. He began to politicize his military, and he elevated his own cousin to be army commander.
This political poker game would bring Thailand closer to confrontation. According to secret American diplomatic cables obtained by WikiLeaks, Thaksin was also trying to exert influence inside the royal palace by allying himself to the heir to the throne.
Bangkok observers have been aghast at what they perceive as Thaksin's unwillingness to be appropriately obeisant to His Majesty. The king will not be around forever, and Thaksin long ago invested in Crown Prince futures.
But the buccaneering businessman had gone too far. In September 2006, Thaksin was overthrown while abroad, accused by the army of corruption, nepotism, and insulting the king.
So far, the absence of any resistance to the coup may be due to this man, the king. In this country, the monarchy is revered, and the king seems to have given his tacit support to the takeover.
Thailand was plunged into an era of political chaos. Thaksin exiled himself abroad to escape corruption charges. Pro- and anti-Thaksin groups, defined by the colour of their shirts, took to the streets. In March 2010, pro-Thaksin red shirts began demonstrating to overthrow the government, a coalition backed by the army.
I first joined on the 12th of March. I went with my 3 children. The feeling that I had in joining the demonstrations, personally, I wanted Parliament dissolved. I wanted a fresh election. I wanted a new government.
Samran Wagran was typical of Thaksin's supporters, one of the rural poor. He'd originally come to Bangkok to search for work. Instead, his family would be engulfed by tragedy in the crisis ahead.
The atmosphere at the beginning of the demonstration was fine. It was fun.
The protests paralysed Bangkok's business district. On April the 7th, protesters stormed Parliament. Ministers were forced to flee. Thailand was moving towards a decisive showdown. By April 10th, after weeks of demonstrations, the government had had enough. The army went in to clear demonstrators, firing tear gas and rubber bullets.
I got a phone call from a friend saying that they're starting to shoot at demonstrators. I heard like firecrackers, but actually it's tear gas.
Rubber bullets were fired, at first a few and then many of them.
Most demonstrators like Samran and his family were peaceful, but there were some armed militants among the crowd facing the army.
My son was standing here. He was holding a Thai flag and shouting, "Red shirts, fight, fight!"
There was a surreal soundtrack. The army pumped jazz music through loudspeakers, tunes composed by the king, a noted saxophone player.
I heard the royal jazz music coming from the direction of the school.
So you're standing there, you hear jazz music written by the king.
It was composed by the king, yeah.
And the army were playing this?
The army were playing it.
The army say the music was intended to calm people. But then came an incident that dramatically changed the atmosphere. Three grenades were fired into the army lines, killing the colonel leading the operation and 4 other soldiers. Many more were injured. Under continuing fire from armed militants operating on the red shirt side, the panicked troops responded fiercely.
Some people were crying, some people were screaming, and even the medic, they also got like angry. They were saying like, how could you do this to the people?
Facing directly towards the army was Samran Wagran and his 2 sons. Suddenly Sawat, the eldest, fell to the ground.
He turned to look at his younger brother. Then he was shot in the head from above by a sniper. His head was a mess.
This mobile phone footage shows the deadly result.
After my son collapsed, I thought he was dead because his brain had splattered out on the road.
After you saw him fall, what did you do then?
After my son collapsed, I ran to him and I cradled his neck in my arms. The soldiers tried to pull him away by the legs, but were outnumbered by red shirts. So we held on to him. I took off my red shirt and I wrapped up his brain. Then I took him to the hospital. Then I took his brain to leave at the Democracy Monument.
26 people were killed, over 800 injured in violence triggered by the grenade attack. It still hasn't been proved who did it, but its effect was dramatic.
As a result of the attack on April 10th, you see the Thai military becoming much more repressive against the red shirts and really shooting into the crowds.
In the chaos of last spring, a range of armed groups appeared on Bangkok streets. Some consisted of former and current soldiers who supported Thaksin. These groups would become known as black shirts. They fired at the army on numerous occasions, killing and wounding soldiers and attacking political opponents of the Red Shirts. Militants also stormed a Bangkok hospital and threatened medical staff, according to the internationally respected group Human Rights Watch. As the conflict worsened, the highest price would be paid by the innocent. With his roots in fashion and social issues, Italian photographer Fabio Palenghi was no war journalist. But as things got worse, Fabio dedicated himself to documenting the reality on the streets.
Fabio was giving a very sharp message, a very clean message. His work was to be a witness and to be a guard of human rights.
On May the 14th, parts of central Bangkok were declared live fire zones by the army. Despite a government offer of elections, the Red Shirts refused to move. The mood among some leaders had hardened. Some spoke of turning Bangkok into a sea of fire. Human Rights Watch accused the army of randomly shooting into crowds. Of the more than 50 killed in this period, the overwhelming majority were civilians. On May the 19th, the army advanced to clear the streets. The decisive hours were approaching.
On the morning of the 19th, I remember looking out the window. There was a huge amount of smoke. Well, it was a city that was basically under siege and had been for the past week. I think everyone was wondering, okay, is this the day that the whole thing is going to come crumbling down? I left after that with my camera, just going handheld, and went into the Red Shirts section.
Brad Cox found himself working alongside Fabio Palenghi at the barricade marking the front line of what had become Red Shirt territory in central Bangkok.
I was at the front barricade. This was a temporary setup, and it was literally just a few tires and a couple of iron bars, metal bars, and that was it. I mean, it really offered no protection.
Fabio's sister has retraced his final steps.
So, what happens is, you have the army coming from this direction?
The army, this direction, that direction.
But Fabio sees the army approaching from here, and down here you have the Red Shirts, yeah?
Yeah, long way that way.
A Dutch radio reporter was caught up in the events in the same area as Fabio and Brad Cox.
I ran towards that point where the army was coming in, and at some point bullets started spraying everywhere. Everybody was ducking for cover, and at some point all the people around me started running. All of a sudden I got a real hard blow against my shoulder, and only after a while I saw the blood coming out of it, and I realized I was shot.
I was with Red Shirt member, maybe around 50 people or 60 people there, the intersection over there. I saw the soldier, 5 or 6 soldiers, shot a gun to us.
Shot at you?
Shot, I'm sure they shot. And we escaped from the intersection.
With live fire coming their way, Fabio and the other journalists tried moving to safer ground away from the army.
But there are bullets flying down here.
Yeah.
There are soldiers shooting from all over the place.
Yes, and as well from the buildings, snipers are shooting.
There were armed militants like this one firing at the army in that area. But all the journalist witnesses we've spoken with are adamant they were being shot at from the direction of the military.
down here there are holes from the shooting.
Yeah, let's have a look. I can see over here in this. There you go. There's a bullet hole.
Yes.
I mean, there are just so many around here.
And I suddenly felt this intense burning in my knee. I couldn't really understand what that was, and I looked down and I saw that I had been shot. And my first impulse is like, holy crap, I can't believe it. I got shot, and I decided to turn around to see where it came from. And as I turned around, I saw Fabio Pelenghi on the ground.
That's right around about here.
Here.
He heads out into the middle of the road. Presumably he's looking for cover on the other side. So Fabio heads out from here, moving really quickly, running, gets to here, and then bang, the shot rings out from somewhere around here and hits him.
Yes. So Fabio, more or less here, was laying down facing that.
The Japanese photographer Saito Masayuki, seen here in the pink shirt and yellow helmet, was by Fabio's side.
And I turned around, and I saw Mr. Fabio, and I took pictures.
Was he lying on the ground when you turned around?
Yes.
So these are photographs.
Yes.
This is a photograph you took just after he'd been shot.
Yes.
There's a photograph, in fact, here, isn't there? That's you helping to drag him away.
Yes.
He was just down on the ground. He was obviously seriously hurt. He wasn't moving.
Then another colleagues came from the other side, and so they came here and tried to pull him out.
But by then it's too late.
Yes, it was. He had one hit in the heart.
If he wasn't dead in the moment that he was shot, he was soon thereafter.
To try to find the truth, Isa Pelenghi had to turn detective. She spent most of the last year trying to find out who killed Fabio.
When I came back to Italy, I started on web, on YouTube. There were millions of movie on Thailand. So I start to search again and again and again. I see thousands of videos.
She had no idea how difficult her quest for justice would be. But she wanted the truth to be her final gift to Fabio.
I just stopped working for myself and I start working very hard on things of Fabio. I just needed to do it.
On her return to Milan, she'd established the precise location where Fabio had fallen. She'd been to the spot. She'd seen his blood. The time of Fabio's death, Isa worked out from cross-referencing photographs and video and by talking to people who'd been present.
We were knowing the time. And we were knowing the spot because we went there and the blood was still there. So those were two things very important to fix.
But to seek an answer to the central question, who killed Fabio, Isa had to return to Bangkok. The Italian embassy arranged for her to meet investigators from the DSI, the Department of Special Investigations.
They start very nicely and very welcome with me. I let them talk a little bit, but I knew that there were many mistakes.
This is a special case number 320.
After 2 months of investigation, the D apparently failed to uncover the basics.
We're not really sure really what the exact time, but that things can be found out easy.
Time and place. In between this as we have, I felt like really unbelievable that they didn't know the time and the place where Fabio was shot. And I started to be more more strong to tell them, you know, I'm telling you the right thing. I'm sure about this. I got the evidence of this. And at that point, they start to be more uncomfortable and start to be more embarrassed. Point is not correct, actually.
Nearly a year passed. Isa came back to see what progress had been made.
Isa, 10 months have gone by. What do you hope to hear from them today?
I'm sure, in a way, I would like to have answers, and maybe knowing what happened, but I don't feel like it will be like this, I know.
You're not expecting, but you're hoping.
Yes. I would like to be surprised.
Later that evening, I caught up with Isa.
Isa, you've just come out of the meeting with the DSI. Are you any the wiser? Do you know any more now about how your brother died?
No. Fabio's case, it's on those cases that they call unknown. Responsibility is unknown. But I don't know how much this is, you know.
You don't know how much of their confusion is genuine?
Yes.
Or merely to throw you off the scent?
Yes.
You can't say, really, can you?
No.
Isa says the DSI is now telling her there were no soldiers in the area when Fabio was shot.
The investigators from the government side say that the shots couldn't have been fired by the army because the army weren't there at the time.
It's completely untrue. That is completely false. I can say with absolute certainty that that troops were there from minimum an hour before that, for minimum from 10 o'clock. Of course they were there. Yeah. I didn't even know anyone was disputing that.
Dutch radio reporter Michel Maas was shot around the same time as Fabio in the same location. Who does he blame?
I think the military. Everything points in the direction of the military, because we were hiding and bullets were coming from the direction where we saw the soldiers.
Finding out who killed Fabio is the job of the DSI. The Red Shirt leadership has sources inside the organization. They arranged for 2 investigators to speak with us on condition of anonymity. These men allege the DSI has been told to cover up army killings.
After we concluded in an early case that people were killed by soldiers, other cases that came to the same conclusion were blocked, and we were asked to say that we didn't yet know who did it. We believed that the deaths were caused by soldiers firing their guns. However, as a result, the director of the DSI had to try and dig his way out of this conclusion.
There's no sign of justice in another case, that of Reuters cameraman Hiro Muramoto, killed earlier in the protests. The DSI initially reported he'd probably been killed by soldiers, a conclusion backed up by Reuters' own investigation. But the DSI then changed its mind and said Hiro might have been killed by red shirts. The investigators told us there was a policy of blaming the Reds wherever possible.
There have been attempts to issue an order that in case the culprits could not be found, we should bring charges against the red shirts. The director was the one who issued the order. We've been ordered that if we could not find those who pulled the trigger, we should assume that the red shirts are the ones that pulled the trigger and their supporters.
The director of the DSI declined to be interviewed, but the Thai government told us investigations were impartial and independent and transparent. One should also appreciate the complex and chaotic nature of these incidents with many parties involved, they said.
Ever since the events of last year, scores of opposition supporters have been taken into custody. Many will face charges. But how many members of the military are awaiting trial? The answer is none.
More than 90 people, mostly civilians, were killed in the bloody clashes. Yet unlike the red shirts, the army has never faced the courts for its part in the violence. This man was the public face of the military throughout last year's crisis. How did he respond to charges of a cover-up?
เราไม่ได้ประสงค์ที่จะทำให้ใครตายไม่ว่าจะเป็นทหารตาย
We never intended to cause any deaths, no matter if they were soldiers, innocent people or protesters. We have to prove who killed these people.
เป็นคนฆ่าเขาเหล่านั้นเนี่ย
You will be aware of the allegation which is being made at the moment in public that your chief, the commander-in-chief, went to the DSI and said, back off. Do not find soldiers guilty.
ข่าวก็คือข่าว
News is news. This didn't happen. The army nowadays doesn't want to make a fuss. If this allegation was made about an ordinary person, they would bring an action for defamation. Most of the time the army is patient, because if it did bring a charge every time something like this was said, it would greatly burden the justice system.
Human Rights Watch carried out a year-long investigation and accused the security forces of being largely responsible for the high death toll through excessive use of lethal force, an assertion rejected by the military.
ผมต้องเรียนว่าในสถานการณ์ขณะนั้นเนี่ย
I have to say it was because of the situation at the time. The troop deployment and the use of weapons were not something we had anticipated, but were a result of the violence caused by some protesters who tried to stir up trouble. However, the creation of a live fire zone didn't mean that live ammunition was being used all the time.
หมายความว่าเราจะยิงกระสุนจริงอยู่ตลอดเวลาไม่ใช่
And the army denies it was responsible for the killing of foreign journalists. We would have nothing to gain from that, they told us. Isa Palengi believes she's facing a culture of cover-up in Thailand. It's an experience familiar to scores of Thai families.
คำนี้เราเพิ่งจะได้รับรู้เห็นค่ะว่า
We've been deceived by the word democracy. Because since my daughter died, I've never seen justice. I don't know where to look for it. Where is justice for my daughter?
มันมีตรงไหนสำหรับการตายของลูกสาวดิฉันเนี่ย
Payao's daughter was shot several times in the most contentious incident of the crackdown. And a year on, there's still no official explanation for her death. Kamon Ket had volunteered as a nurse during the protests. On the 19th of May, she was working at an aid station in this temple in central Bangkok. It had been designated as a safe haven by all sides. By 1 p.m, the red shirt leaders had surrendered, fearing they claimed they were about to be assassinated. Soldiers were advancing to clear the streets. According to Human Rights Watch, militants on the red shirt side began to set fire to nearby buildings, including one of the biggest shopping malls in the world. The red shirts deny responsibility for attacks that caused billions in damage. There were gunfights between the army and militants around this area, according to Human Rights Watch. Hundreds of people headed towards the temple compound.
Who decided that this place was going to be a sanctuary?
I don't know who made the decision, but it was negotiated. Both the government and the red shirts had acknowledged in the press that...
once you cross this line here...
Yeah, this should have been, from here on in, was supposed to be a safe zone. So we thought also that it would be safe for us, a safe place to go and do some interviews and, be somewhere we weren't going to get shot at.
Men, women and children had been making use of the temple grounds for days. Nurse Ked and her colleagues dealt with minor ailments and injuries. They worked under pressure, but the morale of Nurse Ked and the team remained high.
After the announcement of the curfew, I called her, and when I spoke to her, I asked her where she was. She said that she was in front of the temple. Well, I'd never been there. I didn't know anything. I thought the tent was on the road in front of the temple. I didn't know it was in the temple. I told her to escape into the temple. I also told her, don't come home today if you can't make it before the curfew at 8 p.m. You should come back tomorrow.
Then things changed dramatically. Militants near the temple complex set off fireworks.
We saw these two fireworks streak out towards the...
Somebody was firing
two fireworks, these homemade fireworks.
In the direction of the army.
In the direction of the army. And then the bullets started pouring in.
And where were the bullets coming from?
From up there.
From there, right up on top of the SkyTrain.
At the time, all we knew was from above and behind us, but now it's obvious it's from the SkyTrain.
Witnesses report seeing soldiers on the sky rail above the temple. These shaky pictures appear to show them aiming their weapons into the grounds.
We were behind a pickup truck, and the bullets were coming in over the cab at such an angle, ricocheting off the ground and into the building.
And you run that way, yeah?
Well, we ran and we dove in behind. There were two pickup trucks parked perpendicular to the door.
When we spoke on the phone, I could hear the gunshots. I was suspicious, but I didn't think it was serious. I asked her why there was still some shooting, even though the leaders had surrendered. I was worried about her, so I told her to get inside the temple. She said, I don't really know what's going on, Mum. She told me that.
As the bullets rained down, a man was shot by the temple entrance. The nurses reacted bravely.
We saw that the injured man was still moving, so my colleagues and I brought a stretcher to rescue him. As we were lifting the injured man, they kept shooting at us.
This isn't one or two shots, this is sustained bursts.
Yeah, it was repeated, and every time you thought, okay, that's it, it's safe to move again, it would start again. So here inside a temple, a Buddhist temple in the center of Bangkok, that has been identified by all sides as a sanctuary. And, you know, people were getting shot and killed in this area between here and the gate.
Not even the medical tent where Nurse Ked was stationed was safe.
I saw Ked falling to the ground face down. I thought that Ked was crouching down to avoid the bullets, but I didn't know at all that the bullets were pouring down on our medical tent. In my mind, I thought my tent wasn't hit. In my mind, I didn't think anybody would do it.
The gunfire was relentless, preventing anyone from helping those inside the medical tent. By the time the shooting stopped, Nurse Ked, face down on the tarmac, was dead.
I think she thought that green cross would protect her, that no one would shoot someone who was so obviously marked as a medic.
Somebody up there did.
3 times. 3 bullets.
I kept asking. I didn't believe that my daughter had died. I believed, and so did Ked, that she was not going to die because she was a volunteer nurse. She wouldn't be put into danger.
We walked back here and laid out on the ground. There were 6 dead bodies. The big concern at the time was that we were going to have more.
Nurse Kate was one of those.
We knew that now, yeah. At the time I didn't look, but yeah, I understand. I know now she was one of them.
It's unacceptable. I think that they knew that we were a medical team on the ground. They knew that our job was to help society. Even a girl who had already fallen on the ground. Just one shot, she was already dead. They shouldn't have shot her again.
Nurse Ked had been shot dead. So too her young volunteer colleague, known as Bug. He took an hour to bleed to death. Nobody could get to him. Those that tried were shot at, according to his colleagues.
We couldn't believe that this was Thailand. My daughter was hiding in the temple. She was a teacher. She was helping people in the temple. The army dared to shoot her like that?
The army denies sniping at civilians. It said it found these weapons in the temple. Soldiers told investigators they shot into the temple grounds after being fired on from inside and around the temple area.
แล้วเป็นไปได้ไหมที่อาวุธสงครามตรงนี้เนี่ยมีส่วนเกี่ยวข้องกับ
Isn't it possible that these weapons were related to someone who was in the demonstrators area and who went to hide in the temple? These people might have been involved in the deaths of the 6 people.
6 คนนี้ด้วยผู้เสียชีวิต6 ศพนั่นน่ะมีบางศพที่เสียชีวิต
Those 6 deaths, some of them died outside the temple, but their bodies were moved inside. This is from interviews of many cases compiled by the investigators. So therefore, saying that these 6 people were killed inside the temple is something that still needs to be clarified by the investigation.
ติดตามต่อไปว่าผลท้ายที่สุดเป็นยังไง
This was a designated safe area, and honestly, I spent hours in here. I never saw a gun.
The governments claimed that the footage of soldiers pointing their guns into the temple may have been taken the following day, after the troops had secured the area. However, the pictures we've obtained clearly show fires raging in central Bangkok at the same time as the soldiers are on the sky rail. These fires had been extinguished the following day. A leaked DSI report quoting named soldiers said there was proof the military had been responsible for 3 of the 6 deaths. Human Rights Watch say that among those killed by the army was a medic. It also found that while there were gun battles outside the complex, there was no evidence the sky rail used by the soldiers had been struck by fire from the temple. Throughout the crisis, a joint committee of security forces and ministers decided on strategy. They blamed red shirt violence for provoking the confrontations and denied there was a shoot-to-kill policy.
What about Nurse Ket, for example, who went there to
Well, that's one case where I'm still very much interested. And as I said, things are inconclusive at the moment. So it wouldn't be fair for me to make any kind of judgment.
How is it a year on that it's so inconclusive? Why is it so slow?
It's very difficult circumstances. You know, how long did it take you to find out about Bloody Sunday?
Well, I'm an Irishman. I knew the facts of it pretty quickly.
Yeah,
but I would come back to you to a situation we're discussing
but to get it confirmed,
you wouldn't have any problem with seeing a soldier or his commander go on trial for an abuse like that.
If they've abused or violated the law.
International reaction was muted. In fact, just weeks after the clashes, Thailand was elected to the presidency of the UN Human Rights Council. Clearly the world saw a different Thailand to the one experienced by those demanding accountability.
Does it trouble you that for many people your legacy will not be as someone who tried to further democracy in this country, but who turned the guns on his own people?
That's not I don't think that's how I would be remembered.
Are you sure?
And yes.
Because a lot of people out there feel you've got blood on your hands.
If that were the description, I don't think that the international community would have reacted the way it did. And I think some people are trying to rewrite history.
There's been no shortage of investigations, but the army remains untouched. Top red shirt leaders, including Thaksin, face terrorism charges. As it moved to crush dissent more widely, the army would accuse its enemies of threatening the monarchy. The military revived an old law. It's called lèse-majesté and carries a jail sentence of up to 15 years for insulting, threatening or defaming the monarchy. Hundreds of cases were brought last year. This is a police station on the edge of Bangkok city centre. The protesters give a hint of what's going on inside. A Bangkok academic has been told to report here for questioning. Writers, human rights activists and politicians have all faced charges in the last year. In May this year, the Thai army filed charges against Professor Somsak for questioning the content of a television interview given by the king's youngest daughter about last year's crackdown.
สัปดาห์หน้าติดตามความประทับใจ
Though striking for the deference of the presenter to the princess, the controversy surrounded comments she made about the damage to buildings allegedly caused by the red-shirt protesters. Professor Somsak had asked why the princess hadn't referred to civilian deaths.
A case like this is just one graphic example of how free speech is being corralled, tightened in Thailand now. And for critics of the status quo, it's not just a question of choosing your words carefully, it's wondering whether you should open your mouth at all.
They specifically claim that I suggested the royal family is biased against the red shirt or biased got involved in politics.
Is that what you believe? Or if you give me an honest answer to that, are you afraid you'll end up in jail?
Yeah, because this is just exactly what they charged me for.
So you can't tell me the truth?
Yeah, even this quite simple question, I am now in a difficult position to give a straightforward answer.
We're in the extraordinary position of me knowing what you think, but you can't say it.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons that this law is so obsolete and should be abolished.
ในหลวงท่านไม่เคยออกมาพูดอะไรที่จะแก้ตัว
The king never defends himself. He has only done good things for Thai people. Therefore, the army, every organization, and the people have a duty according to the law, and their duty as Thais to protect the monarchy.
ปกป้องสถาบันพระมหากษัตริย์
That claim to be the king's defenders has helped keep the Thai army above the law for decades. But the 83-year-old king, the central figure in Thai life, is ailing, and the army fears what will come in his wake.
The jogging for precision in preparation for the succession is an elephant in the room that this country doesn't want to talk about. Either they're so stupid or they just don't want to see the elephant, and I believe it's the latter.
This ceremony shows more clearly how the king is indeed the soul of his nation, the center round which army, government and religion cohere.
For the last 65 years, King Bhumibol has been seen as a virtual god by his subjects, a loved and unifying symbol for all Thais. But according to leaked American cables, his heir, the Crown Prince, is a far more erratic figure.
Long known for violent and unpredictable mood swings, the Crown Prince has few people who have stayed long in his inner circle. It's hard to underestimate the political impact of the uncertainty surrounding the inevitable succession crisis.
In these insecure times, the army is more than ever determined not to be placed in the dock. But now the victims have been given hope by the appearance of this woman, Yingluck Shinawatra. She's Thaksin's sister. He calls her his clone and helped bankroll and direct her campaign from exile. On the campaign trail, she promised justice.
I want to correct the wrong thing to the correct thing.
But that means that if soldiers are found guilty of killing people, they will go to jail.
Yes, they have to, by the legal, have to make the judgment, and the judge have to judge on this case.
If Yingluck is true to her word, it'll be the first time in Thailand's modern history the military is held accountable.
You witnessed a bloody massacre in 1976. You were sent to jail after that. Was there any military person ever brought to justice for that?
No, never. In 76, there was not even an investigation up to the present.
What is the consequence of there not being justice?
It happened again and again, because the military and those perpetrators know that they won't be punished.
They get away with murder?
The word impunity, yes.
Do you have any confidence that the rule of law will work? It hasn't in the past, has it?
Right now.
It's never worked.
Right now it's not work, so that's why the reconciliation should be start with the fair to everyone.
But Yingluck faces a real dilemma. Bringing soldiers or their commanders to justice could risk her being ousted. And as if all this wasn't murky enough, the man behind her campaign, her brother Thaksin, has his own questions to answer on human rights.
Unable to disperse the crowd, a decision was taken to arrest 1,300 protesters in the hope the insurgents could be identified.
Under him, civil liberties were broken, political rights ignored. A war on drugs was carried out in which thousands of civilians were killed without trial. There were massacres against people in the far south. Soldiers carried out these attacks with legal impunity. He actually stated that stability was more important than democracy when he was Prime Minister.
Mr. Thaksin denies charges of human rights abuse and corruption. He declined to be interviewed. But whoever has ruled in Thailand, impunity has been the norm. Little wonder Bangkok is now rife with rumours of a deal that would deliver amnesty for all, including the military and Thaksin. However, the party led by his sister says it's not a priority.
The chances of families of red shirts who were killed in 2010 finding accountability and for the loss of their loved ones is very low, because the military is going to protect its own. It's going to be a very long time before the military is held to any accountability for this.
I'm afraid there won't be anything different between people who died this time and people in the past. After some time they will use the amnesty law. The people who ordered the killing and the army were not judged guilty, and people all died for nothing. They only have a monument. What I can say is I'm afraid they will use this kind of law. I will fight against it, no matter which government is elected.
The journey for the truth is lonely and invariably futile. Yet for the families of the dead, it must go on.
Why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep up this? I mean, it's a struggle now to get any information.
Because you want to know, you want to understand what happened. That's what probably he would have done for me if I were in his place.
The injustice of the past hovers over the present in Thailand. For here, what is covered up is all too easily repeated.